Hello. It's time to talk politics with Madison Maynard right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. All right, so here's a little background on how the government shutdown works. Under Article 1 of the United States Constitution, Congress is the only branch that can decide how money gets spent. Basically, they hold the nation's wallet. Now, the federal government runs on a fiscal year that starts from October 1st and goes through September 30th. To keep things moving, Congress has to pass 12 different spending bills to fund everything from national parks to defense. But lately, political fights have made that process way harder. So when lawmakers can't agree in time, they'll usually pass what's called a continuing resolution, kind of a short-term band-aid that keeps the government funded just for a little while longer. If they don't even manage that, then we'll hit a shutdown. And no one wants a government shutdown. That's when most federal offices close and only what's considered quote unquote essential keeps running. Things like air traffic control and certain national security functions. Everyone else, well, many federal employees and contractors get sent home without pay. The Office of Management and Budget decides which part of the government stays open, but the president also has a huge say in how the shutdown is handled. During this shutdown, about 900,000 federal workers have been furloughed, meaning they're basically stuck at home without paid. And another 2 million are still on the job but are also not getting paid right now. Some key services are still up and running, things like Medicare, Medicaid, and airport security with the TSA, but a lot of other agencies have had a slow process and have even been completely paused. We're talking places like the National Institutes of Health, the CDC, and the WIC nutrition program that helps families with food support. However, let's make sure that it's clear that this is not the first time this has happened. In fact, it's the 11th government shutdown in United States history to actually disrupt federal operations. As of now, it officially takes the title as the most prolonged complete shutdown in United States history. So next, I'll give a quick rundown on how the government shutdown has been going so far. This is Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard on WHBC 96.3 HD3. Hello, this is Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. So here's a quick rundown on the government shutdown so far. It all started, like I said before, on October 1st at 12:01 a.m. Eastern when the federal government officially shut down. Senators tried to hash out a deal that day, debating a shorter continuing resolution to buy more negotiation time. But no luck, and both proposals failed. A day later, some furloughed staff at the Department of Education reported that their out of office emails were allegedly edited to make it look like Democrats were to blame, a possible Hatch Act violation. Fast forward to October 6th, President Trump claimed negotiations were happening, but Senate Majority Leader Schumer said otherwise. On October 8th, Representative Jennifer Kagan pushed a bill to keep military pay flowing, but Speaker Johnson didn't schedule a vote. By October 22nd, the shutdown hit its 22nd day, making it the second longest government shutdown in United States history. The Senate tried a couple of bills to pay federal workers on October 23rd, but one fell short. Then most recently, President Trump announced that a private donor, you heard it right, private donor would fund military pay. Let me say that again. President Trump announced a private donor would fund military pay, which definitely raises some legal and ethical questions. Around the same time, SNAP benefits for November were put on hold, prompting lawsuits from over 20 states. And Vice President J.D. Vance held a private talk with Senate Republicans, blaming Democrats and promising service members would get paid. So this is definitely a messy, tense standoff that's affecting hundreds of thousands of federal workers and millions of Americans. Next, I'll break down the political dynamics behind this shutdown. You're listening to Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Hello and welcome. If you're just now tuning in, it's Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard on WHBC 96.3 HD3. So let's break down the political dynamics behind this shutdown. On the GOP side, big names like, of course, President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Senate Republicans claimed Democrats were pushing free health care for undocumented immigrants. Independent reporting mostly shot that down. There's little evidence of widespread fraud in ACA enrollment. Meanwhile, California Representative Kevin Kiley criticized Speaker Johnson's approach of keeping the House adjourned and expressed a willingness to talk with colleagues across the aisle to get a deal done. After several failed funding votes, Trump blamed Senate Democrats for trying to, quote, shut down the government, with only Senator John Fetterman breaking ranks to support a Republican spending bill. Things got more heated when Trump shared an AI generated video falsely portraying Democrats as prioritizing illegal immigrants over American voters. I mean, he loves an AI generated video. I'm telling you, he loves an AI generated video. And this definitely is not helping with the partisan temperature, that's for sure. Even government emails and websites were reportedly used to blame Democrats and the quote radical left, also raising ethical questions. Some HUD and HHS employees were instructed to send partisan out of office messages, and watchdog groups filed complaints arguing this broke federal rules. Trump framed the shutdown as a chance to cut federal programs he deemed unnecessary, freezing billions in funding for states that lean towards Kamala Harris in the presidential election, like major public transit projects in New York and Chicago. Democrats organized live streams and town halls to explain the shutdown and call out absences from Republican lawmakers. They also criticized the partisan messaging on official websites, pointing to potential ethics violations again. Over 35 former National Park Service superintendents recommended temporary park closures to avoid damage from unsupervised visitors, a sign of the broader operational impact this shutdown has. Early polls showed the public split on blame when it comes to this. And as the shutdown dragged on, more Americans pointed fingers at Republicans and Trump. Pretty consistent with the previous government shutdowns that happened in his first term. Analysts say that the Trump administration's freeze on spending are a bold use of executive power. Congress controls the purse, but the administration essentially refused to allow spending directives, something almost unprecedented in United States history. And coming up in our second hour, we'll be talking with a federal worker who's currently on her third furlough in her entire career. She's got a first-hand perspective on what the shutdown really feels like, the stress, the uncertainty, and the day-to-day realities. Trust me, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. I'm Madison Maynard, and you're listening to Time to Talk Politics on WHBC 96.3 HD3. Hi, welcome to the second hour. You're listening to Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. Now we'll hear from an anonymous federal worker. She starts by discussing if different organizations are supporting and assisting federal employees during tough times like this shutdown. Let's give it a listen.
Obviously, good to get their names out there and like people know who they are and where people can receive help. So any avenue where organizations can do that are helping people, great. But I will say at least third furlough I've experienced in my federal career. Most agencies or most places where you can receive help, at least for me, have been little to no help, or it is help for maybe a shorter amount of time. So, a week or two, sure, that might help get, a couple of things done. What I can say is, and I haven't really explored it that much for this layoff, but the last furlough and RIF process that we went through the last time the Trump administration was in office, I did receive a lot of support from, I'll say, the day-to-day businesses, credit card companies, my car, where I paid my car payment, they deferred payments. A lot of people were supportive. Local stores were giving discounts to federal employees. They really did understand and really did empathize with the struggle of the fact that we weren't getting paid.
Coming up next, we'll pick back up with our conversation with the federal worker and hear more about her experiences during the shutdown. This is Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard on WHBC 96.3 HD3. I hope you're enjoying the show. Hello. This is Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. So let's continue our chat with the federal worker. This time she talks about what being on furlough has been like for her, and she shares her thoughts on the No King protest from a few weeks back. We actually spoke on the day of the protest. Take a listen.
Most people don't really think about the fact that even if you are in this furloughed status, the people that have to go in and work every day are still driving distances, putting gas in their car, still putting food on the table in order to get to work and still not getting paid at the same time. I think that's probably even more frustrating the longer that this furlough goes on than the folks that are sitting at home. I am pleased to see that these types of movements are still taking place. They don't get as much press coverage, I believe, as they probably should. I think there's a lot to be said and a lot that maybe people that don't live in heavily impacted areas like the DC area may not really realize is going on and how the ripple effect of all of this actually, hurts all kinds of industries, not just the federal employees, but the travel industry, the health industry, the banking industry, it goes on and on and on. So the ripple effect of all of that. So it's nice to be able to see that in all of these metropolitan areas, maybe not so many metropolitan areas, but locations across the United States are really actually standing up and making themselves known. A lot of what I've seen is that people really are um, uneducated or unaware of how much this impacts the greater, population and the greater economy.
Coming up, we'll wrap up our conversation with the federal worker and hear her final thoughts on navigating the shutdown. So don't go anywhere. This is Time to Talk Politics on WHBC 96.3 HD3. Don't go anywhere. Hello and welcome. You're listening to Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard on WHBC 96.3 HD3. Now we're wrapping up our conversation with the federal worker as she shares more about how the shutdown has impacted her life. Take a listen.
Having gone through this several times now, it never gets easier. It always gets more and more challenging. There's definitely much more at stake this time than in times past. I've had colleagues that are also getting termination notices as well as being put on furlough. So there's a lot that is taking place. And in a very short period of time, we as federal workers have gone through a lot of changes, dealing with, the five bullets and the Doge interviews and things of that nature. It really does make it a very stressful environment for people to operate and function in on a day-to-day basis. And for the most part, we are here to, make sure that we are doing our due diligence and our civil service as federal employees. And it has been extremely stressful and extremely challenging, especially with this new administration and how aggressively they've gone about doing things. So it is really difficult. I'm very concerned about my staff, my counterparts, my coworkers, their mental health, their physical health. It has been extremely taxing on a large majority of people, especially in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area.
Big thanks to this incredible federal worker for bravely sharing her story with us. Her experience is just one of many, and it's so important to hear voices like hers during times like this. Coming up, we'll wrap up this episode of Time to Talk Politics with Madison Maynard right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Time to Talk Politics. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. And hey, if anything we talked about today got you thinking, I'd love to hear from you. As always, reach out to me on Instagram at WHBC underscore Howard U, or drop your thoughts through the open mic tab on the WHBC app. Don't forget, we got new live episodes every Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. right here on WHBC 96.3 HD3. We talk politics here so you can go out and make your voice heard because your voice matters. I'm Madison Maynard. See you next time.